In the HL part of periodicity, we are only learning about these elements. Okay, that's the D block elements. And only D block elements may also not the entire block. The full D block is this. This is the entire D block, but we are only talking about the first row in the D block element. So when we're talking about these elements. So these are the transition elements or transition metals. Now, what do you learn about these transition metals? The properties, basically. These metals have unique properties, some peculiar properties, which other metals don't show. So we will see those properties and reasons for some of those properties. So if those who are have the IGCSE, they're aware that what properties do they have? Like, they form colored compounds, which other metals don't. Like, if you see these metals and these metals, all these metals will not form colored compounds. Transition metals will form colored compounds. Also, for transition metals, this D block element will show variable valency, like more than one oxidation state. They also form complex ions. Okay, they show some of them show magnetic properties. Some of them are most of them are basically used as catalyst. Okay, so so we'll be seeing the reasons for these properties and the reasons for these properties. So these are the 10 elements about which we are learning in this part. The HL part of periodicity is all about these 10 elements. And as we just discussed that these elements will have unique properties or different properties. So first we'll see the electron configuration of each one. Physical properties, just learn this. Remember these physical properties. Okay, now about the electron configuration of these metals. So from scandium up to zinc, this is the electron configuration. So you can notice that they all have argon as the reference, and then 4s2. All of them have 4s2s except for chromium and copper. So I hope you remember the exception of chromium and copper, that these are the two which have 4s1. Otherwise, all the others will have 4s2. Because one electron from here is gone here. So one electron from copper also is gone here. So that's how chromium will attain a half-filled d orbital. Half-filled matlab, in each of the 5 d orbital there is 1 1 1 1 1. So 1 1 1 1 and 1 electron. Similarly, copper may it's completely filled, which means 2 2 2 2 2 electrons. Okay, because they have the 4s1 here and not 4s2 like others. Okay, now we'll talk about the electron configuration of the ions. Like what you see on the screen is the electron configuration of atoms. Electron configuration of all these atoms. Now let's see the electron configuration of ions. So we will take scandium ka ion, scandium ion ka charge 3+ for some reason, and all the others will be 2+. So let's remove those electrons according to the charge. So because scandium is 3+, I have to remove 3 electrons. Okay, so I've removed 3 electrons here. And for everybody else, I will remove 2 electrons because they're all 2 plus charge. So chromium may 1 electron from 4s and 1 electron from 3d. Then 2 electrons. Everybody note that whenever you have to remove electrons from a transition metals, you have to remove first, you need to remove electron from 4s. And if any more electrons you need to remove, then remove from 3d. But first you need to remove the electrons from 4s. Again in copper, 1 electron from 4s and 1 electron from 3d. And zinc may say 2 electrons here. Okay, now let's see how many electrons do we have in the 3d of each ion. So how many electrons the Sc3 plus have in the 3d?
0.
Yeah, there are 0 electrons. It's empty. Okay, and then in titanium,
2.
2, then here 3, then 4, then 5, and again, no, this is 6, and 7, and 8, and 9, and 10. Okay, so 0, which means this is empty. The orbital is empty. And 10 means it's full. The entire d block, d orbital is full. So if I exclude the empty and the full, this is empty and this is full. If you see the remaining ones, they have incompletely filled d orbital. They have incompletely filled d orbital, which means that it's neither empty nor full. There is a vacancy for at least one more electron to be added. Like in copper, I can add 1 electron here. Nickel may I can add 2 electrons here, and so on. So they're incompletely filled d orbital. And the reason why the transition metals show some unique properties or some different properties is because of this reason, that transition metals ions, they have incompletely filled d orbitals. Okay, the reason for that we'll see in some of the cases, though in not all the cases, that how does this incompletely filled d orbital like is the reason why they show the unique or very peculiar properties. Any questions so far? Anybody has not understood any part?
No questions, sir.
Let's move ahead. The first property, chemical property that we'll be seeing is the okay. Now because of this, if you see the that zinc, which is here, which has the full d block, is not considered as a transition metal. Also scandium may, if it's Sc3 plus, that will also not show transition metal ka unique properties because that's uska the orbital is empty. So scandium may Sc3 plus is not considered as a typical transition metallic property, and zinc is also not considered as a transition metal. That's because we just talked about that they should have incompletely filled d orbital. But Sc may, scandium may 2 plus, yeah, that may show the transition metal properties, but Sc2 plus is a very rare oxidation state. Like usually scandium shows Sc3 plus only. Usually scandium shows Sc3 plus only. Scandium does not show Sc2 plus. That's not a common oxidation state. Okay, so that's the reason why scandium almost we can say is not a transition metal, because the only ionic state, the Se2+, 2+ oxidation state in which it shows the transition metal properties, that is not a very common, that's a very rare oxidation state. Okay, yes, Pankuri. Pankuri nahi, Ananya.
So if you get a question where they give you the periodic table
Hmm.
and they ask you to sketch, shade the transition metals for the first row only,
That's
then
see,
then you will,
I don't think they will ask such questions. But now you know that
yeah,
zinc is not a transition metal.
so you'll shade everything except zinc and scandium, right?
Scandium not, because scandium is 2+ is no.
Okay, so you'll still shade it.
Yeah, because Sc2+, that's possible. I'm saying that's rare, but that's possible. No?
Okay.
Okay, so here zinc, actually in the old syllabus they had zinc and scandium both not as transition metal in the old syllabus. In the new syllabus only zinc. Okay, that's the reason why. That's why zinc, if you see, it doesn't show colored compound. All the zinc compounds are white. Zinc is never used as catalyst. Zinc does not show oxidation, variable oxidation state. So it does not show the properties of a typical transition metal. Okay, so next is why these metals will show variable valency. Examples are iron. Iron can be Fe2+ also, iron can be Fe3+ also. So if I have an iron chloride, the formula could be FeCl2 or FeCl3. Both the compounds exist. Similarly, vanadium. Vanadium, so there are so many oxidation states. Like if I'm talking about vanadium oxide ka formula can be VO, it could be V2O3, it could be VO2, V2O5, V2O5. So these are the various oxides of vanadium which exist. That means vanadium also shows a variable valency. Okay. But if you see zinc, zinc will only show agar chloride hai to zinc chloride ZnCl2, that's it. Zinc oxide hai to ZnO, that's it. So why do they have variable, why do they show variable valency? So this is the good example, the comparison of magnesium and manganese. Now magnesium is not a transition metal. Magnesium is a non-transition metal, and manganese is a transition metal, and this is non-transition metal. Okay, so you can focus on the ionization energy, successive ionization energies in magnesium. So the dotted lines are magnesium ka ionization energy. So here is the first ionization energy and the second ionization energy. Matlab, losing one electron and losing the second electron. Okay, so the difference between the first and the second ionization energy is very small. There is a very small increase. But you can see that second to third for magnesium is a large increase. Okay, the increase is very large. So it's difficult for magnesium to lose a third electron. So spontaneously, it will only lose 2 electrons, not a third electron. Okay, third electron may not be lost. But something like manganese, first ionization energy, second ionization energy, and third ionization energy, there is a small increase between first and second and third. So if manganese can lose second electron, it can very well lose a third electron also. With little more energy, it can lose a third electron also. With even little more energy, it can lose fourth electron also. So it can, this way it can go up to losing 7 electrons. So manganese can be in Mn2+ up to Mn7+. That's because the successive ionization energies in manganese have a small difference. Successive ionization energy show a small increase. But in magnesium, in the successive ionization energy after first and the second, the third is a large increase. Okay, so magnesium will show only Mg2+, but manganese can show 2+ up to 7+. Okay, so that's the reason for the transition metals showing variable valency. Any questions, anyone? Okay.
No, sir.
This table, table 14, is given in the data booklet. And this has shown the common oxidation states of different transition metals, the first row D block elements. Okay. So you can see scandium where they have shown +3, but not +2, because +2 is not a very common oxidation state. Manganese has so many. Okay, chromium has 3, okay, and so on. Vanadium has, as I was saying, +2, +3, +4, +5. Okay, that's the reason why the oxides are VO, VO2, V2O3, and V2O5. Now, why, how these transition metals form complex ions? No, in fact, we are not seeing how do they form complex ions. We just see the details of complex ions, like how the complex ions are, how they form, what is the structure of them, and how do you derive the oxidation states, the coordination number, etc. So let's check about the complex ions. Okay. So to understand complex ions, let's start with simple ions. Now, what are simple ions? Like if suppose copper loses 2 electrons, it becomes copper 2+, which is a cation. Now, this is a simple cation. This is the cation which can exist by itself. It's alone. Okay, that's a simple ion. But if suppose that if I drop the copper ion, this copper ion into in water. If I drop the copper ion in water, suppose this is a copper ion, then in the water it will be surrounded by water molecules. Okay, in the water it will be surrounded by water molecules. So this black dots that I'm showing are the water molecules. What's wrong? Okay, now let's see the details of this particular, like the blue dot that I have shown surrounded by 6 black dots. Okay, that entirely is the complex ion. Now let's see the structure of that. In the water, when I'm adding this copper ion, so I have the copper ion here, and I have water molecules around it. So water molecule made this oxygen here and hydrogen. This is a water molecule. So you can see that water molecules are surrounding the copper ion. Okay, now how, why those water molecules are around it? Why those water molecules are around it? Because these water molecules are bonded with the copper ion. Water molecules are bonded with the copper ion. So how can they be bonded? Oxygen atom here in the water has a lone pair of electron. If you check the Lewis structure of water, these are bonded electron pairs, and this is lone pair of electron, this is lone pair of electron. So water has two lone pairs of electron. So उसमें the lone pairs of electron are on the oxygen. So oxygen में the lone pair of electrons on oxygen, okay, it will form a coordinate bond with the copper ion. It will form a coordinate bond with the copper ion. This is what is coordinate bond. We have already seen that in the bonding SL part. Okay, so here again, so every oxygen atom here which has a lone pair of electron will form a coordinate bond with the water molecule, with the copper ion. Sorry. So this way, the 6 water molecules are bonded to the copper ions by a coordinate bond. And why coordinate bond? Because the water molecule has a lone pair of electron with which it can form a dative bond or coordinate bond with the copper ion. So, however, the copper ion now is not alone. Copper ions are bonded by 6 water molecules around it. So now the copper ion itself is not an independent particle. Copper ion is not an independent and individual particles. Now copper ions and the 6 water molecules together is one particle. Hence, the entire structure is an ion now. And such ions are called as complex ions. And molecules like water molecule here, which are forming the dative bond with a central metal ion, they are called as ligands. This water molecule, all the water molecules are called as ligands.
So, sir,
yeah,
the difference between a complex ion and just like a normal ion is the dative bonds.
Difference between what?
The difference between a complex ion and like a normal ion is just that the complex ion has dative
Normal
bonds.
Normal ion will be alone, no? Normal ion is alone, like it is not surrounded by any molecule. Okay, and complex ion may the central ion is surrounded by ligands. So complex ion will have two things: central metal ion and the surrounding ligands. Okay, so complex ions are made up of these two particles. Okay, and simple ion is only the metal ion, no ligands around it. So here I have taken water as a ligand. Now water is not the only ligand that you can have in complex ion. There are several molecules or ions which can act as ligands. The common ones are water, which we have already talked about. Ammonia is also a very common ligand. Nitrile is a common ligand. Hydroxide is a common ligand. Chloride is a common ligand. Okay, and so there are many ligands. The list is given in the data booklet. List of the ligands is given in the data booklet, so you can refer to that. I'll show you that list also. Is everyone clear about the complex ion, like how the complex ion is formed? OJC especially, because you have not done this earlier. So now there are several complex ions. Here I have taken the example of copper and the water. Let us see how will you write the formula of a complex ion. So complex ion has to be written in a square bracket. So you open the square bracket, write the symbol of the metal first, metal ion first. But uska charge you don't have to write. So just write Cu. Don't write the 2 plus charge. Okay, don't write any charges inside the square bracket. Don't write any charges inside the square bracket. So Cu, though it has a 2 plus charge, I will not write that in the square bracket. So first I'll write the symbol of the metal, then open a round bracket, write the formula for the ligand, which is H2O here, and show how many ligands are there. So 6 ligands here. That's it. Close the bracket. And now write the overall charge on top of this here. Overall charge over here. What do you mean by overall charge? Charge on the copper ion and charge on the ligand added together. Total charge of the charge on the ligand and all the ligands and charge on the copper ions or the central ion added together. Now copper ion has the charge of 2 plus, but water does not have a charge. Water is a neutral molecule. So there are 6 into 0. 6 water molecules, each will have 0. So 2 plus plus 6 into 0, which is 0. So it is plus 2 or 2 plus. So the charge on the complex ion here will be 2 plus. Okay, so this is the way you write the formula of the complex ion. This is the way you write the formula of the complex ion. That square bracket, first write the metal, then open the round bracket, write the formula of the ligand and write how many ligands are there, close the bracket, and write the overall charge on this. Yes, Pankaj.
So, but if you have to find the overall charge, and if you have the charge on the metal ion, how do you do that?
If you what? If you have to find the overall charge and
you don't have the charge for the metal ion,
then you
so
can't. Obviously, how can you? You don't know. Do you know the charge on the metal ion?
no, here because it could be Cu plus 1 as well, right?
Yeah, exactly. So if you don't know the charge, then
Okay.
how can you write?
Yeah.
You should know the charge. Okay. Okay. Fine. Anyone? Any questions to be asked? Yep. Vaishali.
Sir, do you have to figure out how many ligands are there, or will it be provided to you?
No, that is something that you're not supposed to know. That they will provide.
Okay.
Because in this case there are 6 ligands. In some complex and there are 4 ligands. Some complex and there are 2 ligands. Okay, knowledge of that you should not. You're not supposed to have. But when we do the reasoning for the colored compounds, you will be only expected to know the splitting for those complex ions which have 6 ligands. Okay, matlab octahedral, the shape will come to. So there matlab if they're asking you to for the color, reason for the color, we'll see in the next part. We'll see. In that case, only the cases of 6 ligands you're supposed to know, not the cases of 4 and the 2. But like in general, apart from that topic, any other topic they will not expect you to know. Sorry, the number of ligands or number of coordinate points. They will not expect it. Yes, Alicia.
So I don't fully understand how to like calculate the charge. Could you possibly do an example with a negatively charged like ligand?
Yeah. No. Okay. Let's do one example. Everybody, I'm giving 2 examples. Everybody will calculate the charge and overall charge on the complex ion and send me the answer. You don't write down and take a picture and send. Just type in the answer. I'm giving you 2 complex ions, A and B. So just write A ka charge is this much, B ka charge is this much. Okay. Okay, here Fe is 3 plus and Cn is 1 minus. So you need to write the charge on this complex ion. Okay, Alisha, start. In the question C, you have to give me the charge on the metal ion. I'm giving the charge on the complex ion. I need to give me the charge on the metal ion.
So NH3 doesn't have any charges.
A molecule, no? Ammonia is a molecule. It's not an ion.
So can you also give us some of those questions where you have the charge on the complementary ion, which is, let's say this is the cation, so you have the anion written next to the entire complex ion with the charge.
Yeah, okay.
So when we are writing the complex ions, do we have to include the complementary?
No,
Uh,
because that's not a complex ion, that's a normal ion. So here you need to give me the charge on the chromium ion. Just start sending me the answers.
So I've sent it on the Zoom chat.
Same here.
Okay, so we saw the formula, how to write the formula of the complex ion and the complex compound. Next is coordination number. Coordination number is the number of coordinate bonds formed with the central metal ion. Total number of coordinate bonds formed with the central metal ion. So in this, in these cases, suppose if I'm talking the first case, the Fe 3 plus ion, and there are 6 nitride or cyanide ions around that. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So you can see that there are 6 coordinate bonds formed. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So there are 6 ligands and each ligand is forming one coordinate bond, which means there are total 6 coordinate bonds. Okay, so the coordination number over here is 6. Similarly, what should be the coordination number here in case of B?
4.
4, because there is a cobalt ion and there are 4 ammonia molecules, and each ammonia molecule will only form one coordinate bond. Okay, so here the coordination number is 4. Okay, so that's about coordination number. But remember that coordination number does not have to be equal to the number of ligands. Like over here, you can see that there are 6 ligands. Number of ligands 6, coordination number 6. Here the number of ligands 4, coordination number also 4. But this does not have to be, because there are certain ligands where the one ligand can have 2 or 4 or even 6 coordinate bonds. One ligand can have more than one coordinate bond. In that case, number of ligands will be lesser and number of coordinate bonds will be more. So all the examples here are the ligands which can have only one coordinate bond. Such ligands are called as monodentate ligands. So ligands which can form only one coordinate bond are called as monodentate ligands. Like we know that water molecule the water molecule will only form one coordinate bond with the central metal ion. So that's monodentate. Bidentate and polydentate we'll see in some time. Shape of the complex ion. Shape of the complex ion completely depends on number of coordinate bonds. It only depends on the number of coordinate bonds. So whenever the number of coordinate bonds is 6, the shape has to be octahedral. The number of coordinate bonds are 2, the shape has to be linear. And if the number of coordinate bonds are 4, then it could be either tetrahedral or square planar, but which one, that you're not supposed to know. Okay, they will not expect you to know which exactly, what exactly is the shape when the coordination number is 4. Yes, but they will expect you to know the shape octahedral when the coordination number is 6, and shape is linear when the coordination number is 2. Okay, any questions about this?
No, sir.
Now here are the shapes shown. 6 coordinate bonds, so octahedral, tetrahedral, square planar. These are the 2 for the 4 coordinate bonds, and this is the linear. Okay. Now these are the polydentate ligands which are given in the data booklet. These are the examples of polydentate ligands which are the examples are given in the data booklet. So ethane diamine, for example, it can form 2 coordinate bonds. One molecule can form 2 coordinate bonds because there are 2 nitrogens. Each nitrogen has a lone pair of electron. Okay, so if this is a central metal ion, it can form a coordinate bond here and coordinate bond here. So one ligand, it's only one single ligand, but can form 2 coordinate bonds. So that's bidentate. Ethane dioate will also form 2 coordinate bonds. Okay, so if this is the cation, it can form coordinate bond, 2 coordinate bond with the. So one ligand, this is entirely one ligand, but forming 2 coordinate bonds. So that's again bidentate. EDTA, which is hexadentate, 6 coordinate bonds and one single molecule. So nitrogen, and the 4 oxygens here. Okay, so one molecule of EDTA can form 6 coordinate bonds. That's hexadentate. So that's all about the complex ions and the ligands. Next is transition metals also show catalytic properties. The reason you are not supposed to know, like why do they show the catalytic properties, that you're not supposed to know. But you just need to know that there are two types of catalysts, the homogeneous and the heterogeneous. Two types of catalysts which are heterogeneous and the homogeneous. Okay, now examples of both. Just remember these examples. The first 5 examples here are the heterogeneous. And the last 2 examples here are the homogeneous. Now the difference between the two is that heterogeneous may the physical state of the catalyst is different than the reactants. Physical state of the catalyst is different than the reactant. Like example, nickel, iron, MnO2, vanadium, pentoxide, platinum, all are solids. All these catalysts are solid. But if you see the reaction, hydrogenation of alkenes, hydrogen is a gas, alkene is mostly gas. Iron, the solid in the Haber process, ammonia is a gas, nitrogen is a gas, hydrogen is a gas. So you can see that the state is different. MnO2 is a solid, but HO2 is a solution. It's a liquid, it's a solution. Okay. So these are heterogeneous catalysts. And these are homogeneous catalysts where the state of the catalyst and the state of the reactants is same. Okay, any questions here? So just remember those examples. Okay. Now transition metals also show the magnetic properties. Yes, Vaishali.
Sir, could you please check the chat?
Yeah, you have to leave. No, yeah, okay. Okay, now why do they show magnetic properties? Now, why these metals and their compounds, metals as well as their compounds, why do they show magnetic properties? The reason is that they have unpaired electrons. Unpaired electrons. Now, why is that? Why does the unpaired electron give a magnetic property? So we know that electrons are always in the orbital, and each orbital can have 2 electrons. Okay, we always show that by the upward arrow and the downward arrow. In every orbital, we show the electrons in the upward arrow and the downward arrow. So each electron is a magnet. Every electron is a magnet because that spins. It's a charged particle and that spins. So that will definitely generate the magnetic field. So each electron is a magnet. But if there are 2 electrons which are in the same orbital but opposite spin, clockwise and anti-clockwise, then the magnetism of this and magnetism this will be equal and opposite. So that will cancel out. So overall, the orbital will have no net magnetism. No net magnetism. So if it's a paired electron means there is no magnetism shown. So that's the reason why if the magnetism has to be shown, then it has to be an unpaired electron only. So the reason for magnetism is unpaired electrons. So that's diamagnetism. Diamagnetism is due to the paramagnetism. Paramagnetism. So paramagnetism is due to the unpaired electrons. So any element which has unpaired electrons, element or compound, which has unpaired electron will show the paramagnetic properties, which means they are attracted by the magnetic field. Diamagnetism matlab it has paired electron, so it will be repelled slightly by the magnetic field. So only thing that you need to remember here is that magnetism is directly connected to the availability of the unpaired electrons. Like these are the cases given. Now copper 2+ is not, sorry, copper 1+. This is not magnetic here because it's all full. There's no unpaired electron here. Whereas Fe2+ and Cr3+ are magnetic, and Fe2+ is more magnetic. That's because it has 4 unpaired electrons. It has 4 unpaired electrons. Any questions about magnetism?
So if the magnetic fields cancel out each other, then why does it still get repelled by another magnetic object?
That shows that it is not magnetic. That shows the repulsion shows that it is not magnetic. Okay, attraction shows that it is magnetic.
But nothing should happen ideally, right? Like it should just stay, not attract or repel.
No. See, it's like no, that's the wrong example. Here it will be repelled, but slightly. It is not like the like charges repel each other. Like suppose if I have 2 magnets, Ns and Ns. Okay, now they will attract each other because oppositely charged poles are facing each other. But if I keep the other way around, S and N, then they will be repelled from each other. I'm not talking about this repulsion. It's a very slight repulsion. And the slight repulsion will be there because they are charged particles. Okay, and there is a movement. There is a movement. So the net movement is not attracting it. But because there is a movement, there will be no reaction.
Okay.
Okay, the reaction will be repulsion. And the repulsion is not this way, not this repulsion. This is proper repulsion.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, now that's the 13.1 is over. Now we have 13.2, which I will cover up in the next class because this I will not be able to finish today anyways. So we'll keep a, it will take 30-40 minutes to cover up this part. So we'll keep another class for that soon. OIS, your vacation has started, na? Christmas break.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And Alicia, your Christmas break is till
3rd Jan.
3rd Jan.
Yeah.